Welcome to another episode of The Real Truth. It's Tyler James Milliken here today to talk about knowledge and the difference between knowledge and wisdom. It has popularly been discussed that knowledge is one of the most powerful things you can possibly find right next to your Lamborghini and your brand new bookshelves. But biblically speaking, there is a critical difference between wisdom and knowledge. And as you go through the wisdom literature in books like Proverbs, you will find different terms, facets, and features of insight, discretion, knowledge, wisdom, and so forth. It's very important as you read through a book like Proverbs that you actually take hold of these little distinctions, because there are some overlap between these different terms, but they're not exactly synonymous. So like the different cut and color that you can get from turning a diamond and seeing the rays of light glinting through it, you will see all the different facets of wisdom, knowledge, and other forms of revelation and insight in this book. Think about how flat and dead of a reading you would have if you were reading a verse like Proverbs 8 as you go through a book just thinking, oh, everything's just is all the same. These are just flat terms. If these were all just synonyms for knowledge, then Proverbs 8:12 would say, I, wisdom, dwell with wisdom and find wisdom and wisdom, which is nonsense. The point is, these are different facets. Wisdom dwells with prudence. We'll talk about the difference between wisdom and knowledge in a moment here, but prudence is a particular facet or faculty of foresight that allows you to foresee danger and avoid issues. Knowledge is what we'll talk about in a moment, different than the first two. And discretion is the ability, really the Hebrew term here is a term for making plans or even strategies, similar to the concept of in a multitude of counselors, there is safety, making plans, wise planning, and provisions through a process of discretion. So one of the best things you can do is you can compare several English translations to tackle things like this. We really should do a whole series on Bible translations, but you can compare them and get a sense of what English words are being used here. And you'll notice in this case, prudence is used across the board from older to newer translations. That would be one that doesn't show much variation. Whereas similar with discretion here, sometimes you'll see little variations, and then you can look things up in just a good English dictionary. But if you can get a hold of a decent Hebrew or Greek lexicon, even if you don't know the language, you can just start to look up what are these key terms, find some good resources. Maybe we should have a series on resources for word studies in Hebrew and Greek coming soon. But today we're talking about primarily the difference between wisdom and knowledge. And here is the central difference. If you have wisdom, you have the foundation for everything that you need, and then you can fill out your plans and your catalog of understanding with knowledge. So wisdom is going to be the framework, the structure, if you will, that supports and upholds everything in your life. And then you are sort of going to be able to fill the bookshelves with knowledge of additional information as you build on the understanding that you have. So going to Proverbs 24, we actually have a really excellent example and an illustration of this. Proverbs 24:3 says, by wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. So there's a close synonym here between understanding and wisdom. The term for understanding here is a term related to insight and perception. So this is another facet we could talk about, but primarily here we're talking about wisdom as the framework and the foundation by which the house is built. And if we wanted to use an analogy here, we might say that wisdom is like a compass while knowledge is like an engine. What do we mean? If you have wisdom, you have the ability to navigate and make sure that you're going in the right direction. Even if you don't have massive intelligence or knowledge, you'll be able to say, at least I'm heading in the right direction. This is foundational for the guidance for your life. On the other hand, if you had massive intelligence or knowledge, but you were lacking wisdom, you would have a powerful engine that would have you speeding along in exactly the wrong direction because you have no guidance or no navigation. You will propel yourself very powerfully in the wrong direction unless you have wisdom. So, of course, these two things are designed to go together. You're supposed to have a good foundation, and you're supposed to have a powerful engine if you can fill it with knowledge. These are the goals that we would certainly have. But this is why foundational to everything here, when we put wisdom and knowledge side by side, is that the fear of the Lord, a synonym for faith, as we've studied before, it is faith that is the cornerstone, the reshith, the first principle and beginning of knowledge. And yet, on the other hand, fools despise wisdom and instruction. This is the reason why we can say that foundational to all of our knowledge should be the fear of the Lord, but that synonym of faith here is the wisdom that they despise. So in many regards, wisdom is this foundational feature of faith that upholds all of our knowledge in our worldview here. And so this stabilizes our worldview. It gives it shape and definition. It gives it boundaries and clarity. And it helps us to organize and categorize everything about the knowledge that we take in and process and discern from the world around us. Well, you probably have more questions about this one, so let us know down in the comments section what further comments, questions do you have, and stay tuned for upcoming studies in ancient and modern wisdom in comparison to the real truth.